How could a small band of warriors stand against a seemingly endless tide of enemies? This question lies at the heart of one of history's most iconic moments, the Battle of Thermopylae. Picture the ancient world in the early 5th century BCE. The Persian Empire was a colossal force, stretching from the sands of Egypt to the mountains of Persia, its armies rumored to number in the millions. Facing this unstoppable juggernaut was a decidedly tiny Greek force, led by just 300 Spartans alongside a few thousand allies. The odds were staggeringly bleak, yet their story echoes through millennia as a testament to strategy, sacrifice, and unyielding resolve. To truly understand the Battle of Thermopylae, we must first grasp the broader conflict that set it in motion, the Persian Wars. These wars were not mere skirmishes, but a monumental clash between two radically different worlds. On one side, the Persian king Xerxes sought to expand an empire fueled by vast resources and overwhelming manpower. On the other, a coalition of fiercely independent Greek city-states refused to bow, driven by values of freedom and fierce local pride. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of courage and strategy. The sheer scale of the Persian forces seemed unbeatable. Ancient sources tell tales of armies so vast they darkened the horizon, a striking image designed to impress and intimidate. But numbers alone do not guarantee victory. The Greeks, and particularly the Spartans, relied on something more elusive: discipline, superior tactics, and a deep understanding of the terrain. Thermopylae, a narrow mountain pass, would become the ultimate equalizer, allowing this small force to hold back a tide of millions for days. This contrast, few versus many, strategy versus size, is what makes the story so gripping. It invites us to ask, could sheer determination and clever planning overcome brute force? What does it mean to fight against overwhelming odds? Throughout history, few episodes capture these tensions as vividly as Thermopylae. Moreover, the battle raises profound questions about sacrifice and leadership. The Spartans, famed for their warrior culture, chose to stand and fight knowing their likely fate. Their king Leonidas embodied a different kind of valor, not just battlefield prowess but a willingness to face annihilation for a greater cause. Opposing him, Xerxes personified the relentless might of empire, confident that nothing could stop his advance. In setting this dramatic tone, it's essential to remember that Thermopylae is not merely a story of defeat or heroic last stands. It's a complex episode where strategic brilliance clashes with overwhelming numbers, where terrain and tactics become weapons equal to swords and spears. As we journey deeper into the battle's unfolding, we will explore these layers and uncover how 300 men held back millions, and why their stand still resonates today. So as we begin, consider this. In a world shaped by power and politics, how do small acts of courage ripple through time to inspire generations? The secret of Thermopylae lies not just in history, but in the enduring human spirit, a spirit that dares to challenge the impossible. To fully grasp why the Battle of Thermopylae mattered so profoundly, we must first journey back to the world before the clash, a world shaped by shifting empires, fierce independence, and simmering tensions that destined the Greeks and Persians for war. It was a time when two very different civilizations stood at odds, each embodying contrasting visions of power, governance, and identity. On one side was the Persian Empire, the largest empire the world had ever seen by the early 5th century BCE. Under kings like Darius and later Xerxes, Persia stretched from the icy reaches of the Black Sea to the sun-baked landscapes of Egypt and the Indus River Valley. This vast domain was held together by an iron will and a formidable bureaucracy that enforced tribute, laws, and loyalty. The Persians ruled through a centralized autocracy, wielding immense military resources and commanding armies rumored to number in the hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions in later legends. Their soldiers came from diverse peoples: cavalry from Central Asia, archers from Egypt, and the iconic Immortals, an elite Persian infantry unit. Their empire's sheer size made it seemingly unstoppable, a massive tide set to sweep over all who dared resist. But standing against this might was ancient Greece, a world fragmented into fiercely independent city-states known as polis. Unlike Persia's top-down control, these city-states operated almost like small countries, each with its own rules, governments, and armies. Athens prided itself on democracy and naval power. Sparta was a militaristic oligarchy trained to produce warriors from birth. Corinth, Thebes, and dozens of others had their own identities and priorities. This fractured political structure meant the Greeks were not united, far from it. They even fought among themselves regularly. Yet, despite their divisions, a common thread bound them: a deep sense of autonomy and a passionate resistance to foreign domination. This contrast between Persian centralization and Greek independence sowed the seeds of conflict. Persia's expansion inevitably collided with Greek interests, especially when Persian attempts to control Asia Minor and the Aegean Sea brought them face to face with Greek colonies under Persian rule. Greek city-states initially tried to coexist, but tensions mounted as Persian demands for tribute met Greek stubborn refusal. The Ionian Revolt around 499 BCE, where Greek settlements rebelled against Persian domination, was the spark that ignited the broader Persian Wars. As Persia sought to punish Athens and its allies, the Greeks understood they faced a threat unlike any other, a colossal empire intent on domination. Yet the Greek response was complicated by their political rivalries. Athens and Sparta, in particular, had very different views on how to confront the Persian menace. Athens, with its strong navy, favored direct confrontation at sea, while Sparta, with its legendary land forces, prepared to face the invaders on Greek soil. This strategic divergence highlighted not only their differing military strengths, but also the complexities of Greek unity, an uneasy alliance forged not from harmony, but necessity. Against this backdrop, the Battle of Thermopylae emerged as a defining moment. The narrow mountain pass of Thermopylae offered a critical defensive choke point, a place where, despite their numerical inferiority, the Greeks could leverage terrain to counter Persia's overwhelming numbers. It was a bold choice rooted in strategic genius, yet it underscored the sheer desperation of the Greek position. This story is one of dramatic contrast, an expansive, autocratic empire versus fiercely independent warriors refusing to bow. A seemingly invincible army meeting the tactical brilliance of a fragmented but determined coalition. The sense of underdog tension pulses through these events. How could a handful of city-states withstand the tidal wave of Persian power? It is this tension, the clash of vast empire and indomitable freedom, that sets the stage for the sacrifice and heroism at Thermopylae, making it far more than just a battle, but a symbolic stand for the values that would come to define Western civilization. At the heart of the Battle of Thermopylae lies a clash of titans, not just armies, but personalities, two leaders embodying the fierce philosophical and cultural divides between East and West. The Spartan king Leonidas and the Persian king Xerxes stand in stark contrast, one a warrior king molded by a culture of discipline and sacrifice, the other, a mighty emperor whose imperial ambitions were backed by seemingly endless resources and divine authority. Their rivalry sets the stage for a drama as much about leadership and ideology as it is about military confrontation. Leonidas was more than a king, he was the embodiment of Sparta's rigid martial ethos. From birth, Spartan boys were groomed to be warriors, trained relentlessly in discipline, endurance, and obedience. Leonidas, heir to this legacy, carried the weight of his people's expectations and history. His leadership style was direct, authoritative, and deeply rooted in personal bravery. Unlike rulers who led from behind, Leonidas was known to stand shoulder to shoulder with his men, inspiring fierce loyalty through example. For Leonidas, the battlefield was as much a sacred duty as a tactical engagement, a place where honor, courage, and sacrifice defined a man's worth. His decision to hold Thermopylae with only a few hundred men was both strategic and symbolic, a living declaration that a small, resolute force could challenge overwhelming might through resolve and unity. On the opposing side stood Xerxes, son of Darius I, crowned King of Kings, a title symbolizing absolute authority over the largest empire the world had yet seen. Xerxes was a figure steeped in majesty and ritual, ruling through divinely sanctioned power. His vision was expansive, to conquer and unify, to create order through dominance. Unlike Spartan austerity, Persian royalty embraced grandeur and spectacle, with vast processions and ceremonies underscoring their supreme status. Xerxes' leadership style was characterized by magnificence and command from afar. He marshaled enormous armies, believing that sheer force and divine favor would ensure victory. But beneath his imperial splendor lay a restless obsession with subjugation, an unyielding drive to expand Persian dominion over what he saw as rebellious Greek city-states. Their ideological clash ran deeper than mere power struggles. For Leonidas and the Greeks, freedom was paramount, interwoven with their identity as free citizens defending their land and way of life. For Xerxes and Persia, order came through submission, the empire's strength rooted in unity under a single ruler's vision. This opposition framed the battle as a confrontation between democracy's nascent ideals and imperial absolutism, West versus East on the grandest scale. The personal qualities of these leaders under extreme pressure reveal key insights into leadership itself. Leonidas faced near-certain death and yet chose to lead by staying in the fight, a stoic expression of sacrifice for the greater good. His courage galvanized his allies and inspired generations, becoming synonymous with heroic resistance. Xerxes, meanwhile, confronted unexpected resistance that challenged his assumptions of invincibility. His frustration and eventual wrath, when the battle dragged on, underscore the psychological strain leaders face when plans unravel. Their rivalry invites us to explore questions fundamental to leadership. How does a leader inspire unwavering loyalty in the face of overwhelming odds? What separates true courage from reckless bravado? How do differing worldviews shape the decisions leaders make when their people's futures hang in the balance? by delving into the characters of Leonidas and Xerxes, we uncover not only the human dimensions behind historical events, but also timeless lessons about power, vision, and sacrifice. The legacy of these two figures extends far beyond the sands of Thermopylae. Leonidas is remembered as a symbol of defiant courage and the ideal warrior king, immortalized in art, literature, and collective memory. Xerxes' reign, though marked by military setbacks in Greece, reflects the persistent allure and challenges of empire building. Their story, past and present, resonates because it encapsulates the eternal struggle between freedom and domination, individual valor and imperial might. As we move forward, understanding these leaders' inner worlds enriches our grasp of the battle itself, not just as a clash of armies, but as a profound meeting of minds, cultures, and destinies. The drama of Thermopylae is, in many ways, a story of these two men and the extraordinary pressure placed on their decisions. Their rivalry set the emotional and ideological tone that would shape and haunt history itself. To understand how a small force could hold back an empire, one must first step onto the ancient battlefield itself, the narrow, rugged mountain pass of Thermopylae. This unassuming stretch of land, where steep cliffs rise abruptly from the sea, proved to be far more than just a geographic detail. It was the linchpin of Greek strategy and a monumental equalizer in the face of staggering Persian numbers. Thermopylae, translating to the Hot Gates, named after the nearby sulfur springs, was an ancient route that connected the northern and southern parts of mainland Greece. For centuries, it served as a critical gateway, the bottleneck through which any invading force from the north or east had to pass to penetrate the heart of Greece. Its narrowness, at points no wider than a few dozen meters, meant that only a limited number of soldiers could engage at once, effectively neutralizing the Persians' superior numbers. Imagine a vast Persian army, swelling with tens or even hundreds of thousands of troops, streaming toward Greece with confident momentum. Their plan relied heavily on their numerical advantage, overwhelming the defenders through sheer volume of men and cavalry. But here at Thermopylae, the scale of that strategy was suddenly rendered impotent. The pass forced the Persians to funnel their forces into a tight choke point, where phalanxes of Greek hoplites could stand shoulder to shoulder, their tightly packed spears and heavy shields forming an almost impenetrable wall. The terrain itself was a natural fortress. On one side, the steep mountains rose sharply, making flanking almost impossible. On the other, the sea hugged the rocky coastline, limiting movement and preventing the Persians from outmaneuvering the defenders. This geographic stranglehold was the perfect setting for a defensive stand, but also a site of tension, since any breach could lead to disaster. The Greeks had to hold their ground knowing that a single slip or betrayal could send their fragile defense tumbling. This geography highlighted a critical contrast: the Greeks' keen understanding and use of terrain versus Persian arrogance and overconfidence. The Persians, accustomed to dominating open terrains with cavalry charges and massed infantry, initially underestimated the strategic value of Thermopylae's cliffs and narrow paths. Their tendency to fight on their own terms was challenged here by a landscape that forced humility, patience, and innovative tactics. Instead of spreading out and overwhelming their enemy, they were compressed into a vulnerable funnel. Not only did the terrain dictate battle tactics, it also shaped the psychological landscape. For the Greeks, holding Thermopylae was more than physical defense. It was a symbolic stand representing the protection of freedom at the gateway to their homeland. For the Persians, failure to quickly breach the pass was a blow to their invincible image and raised deep frustration among commanders who feared wasting precious time and resources. The importance of Thermopylae as a battleground was cemented through Greek strategy that combined spatial advantages with disciplined formations. Spartan-led forces exploited the choke point to force protracted combat where the Persians' numbers counted for less. This calculated use of geography dramatically slowed the Persian advance and bought critical time for the rest of Greece to prepare for war. In essence, Thermopylae was not just a battlefield, it was a masterclass in strategic thinking where nature itself became a weapon. The Greeks transformed perceived vulnerability into a fortress of strength. Meanwhile, Persian arrogance, a tendency to rely on overwhelming manpower and show of force, was met by a cold reality shaped by stone cliffs and narrow pathways. As we delve deeper into the battle, keep in mind this profound lesson. Victory in war is never just about how many fight, but often about where and how they choose to fight. Thermopylae reminds us that even against insurmountable odds, geography and strategic insight can create moments of extraordinary resistance. At the core of Thermopylae's drama lies a brutal contest between two fundamentally different armies, each reflecting the unique cultures and military philosophies of their civilizations. To truly appreciate the battle's intensity and stakes, we must unravel the composition of these forces and the battlefield formations that shape the fight. On the Greek side, the backbone of the defense was the hoplite, heavily armored infantry soldiers whose discipline and unity were unmatched. Clad in bronze helmets, greaves, and breastplates, wielding long spears and large round shields called hoplons, these warriors formed the famous phalanx formation. This tightly packed battle line was designed to maximize defensive strength and offensive thrusts simultaneously. Imagine rows of warriors standing shoulder to shoulder, their shields overlapping to create an almost impenetrable wall of bronze, their spears bristling outward like a forest of deadly spikes. The phalanx demanded intense discipline and trust between soldiers. A single weak link could unravel the line. The hoplites' armor was heavy but effective, providing key protection without sacrificing too much mobility. Their spears, about 7-9 feet long, allowed them to strike from behind the shield wall while remaining shielded against enemy attacks. This tight formation was the Greeks' answer to Persian numerical superiority. It turned the battlefield from a contest of numbers to one of cohesion and controlled force. Contrasting sharply with the disciplined Greek hoplites was the vast, eclectic Persian army. Unlike the relatively uniform Greek infantry, Persia's forces were a melting pot of ethnicities, each bringing unique fighting styles reflecting their cultures. The corps included the elite Immortals, a well-trained, heavily armed infantry unit numbering about 10,000, named for their legendary status and constant number maintained by immediate replacements. Beyond them were vast numbers of lightly armed archers, cavalry, and specialized units like camel riders. This diversity was both strength and complexity. While it allowed versatile tactics, it also required coordination across different languages, training, and fighting methods. Persian warfare largely relied on overwhelming the enemy with numbers and multi-layered tactics, including massive cavalry charges intended to outflank enemies and archery barrages that could break opposing lines from a distance. However, their infantry, especially the lightly armed troops, often lacked the heavy armor and close combat training that Greek hoplites possessed. This fundamental difference between Greek and Persian forces shaped the battle's dynamics. In the narrow confines of Thermopylae, the Persian cavalry in large numbers could not maneuver freely, blunting the typical Persian advantages. The Greeks' phalanx formation thrived here, its unity and armor optimized for close-quarters combat, while Persian numerical superiority was effectively neutralized. Yet the Persian army's size was not merely a statistic, but a psychological weapon. Their sheer numbers, vast logistics, and diverse units underscored the might of an empire that seemingly could crush any resistance. This contrast, Greek discipline and armor against Persian size and varied forces, created a tension that defied simple expectations about ancient warfare. Another dramatic element was the leadership and morale tied to these forces. The Spartans and their Greek allies fought with a deep cultural conviction, viewing battle as a sacred duty and survival of their way of life. Their unity behind King Leonidas reinforced the legendary cohesion of the phalanx. Conversely, the Persians, while confident in their empire's overwhelming power, faced the challenge of maintaining coordination amongst diverse units and an emperor whose monumental expectations bred immense pressure. The battle formations and troop compositions here teach us one of war's key lessons. Success often lies not in raw numbers alone, but in tactical discipline, training, and adaptation to terrain. The Greek phalanx, a pinnacle of military organization, met the enormous, multi-ethnic Persian forces in a clash where each side's strengths attempted to overcome the other's limitations. As the battle unfolds in the days to come, the significance of these forces and formations will be tested to the limit, where armor meets spear, strategy meets numbers, and cohesion faces chaos. Understanding this anatomy of the battlefield sets the foundation for comprehending why Thermopylae remains one of history's most studied and inspiring standoffs. The three-day battle, chronological narrative. The Battle of Thermopylae unfolded over 3 intense, tumultuous days, each marked by shifting tides of hope, despair, and heroic resolve. It was a confrontation unlike any other, a small Greek force holding a narrow mountain pass against a vast Persian army, where every moment tested the limits of endurance, leadership, and strategy. Day 1, Arrival and First Clash. As dawn broke, the Persian army, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, poured toward the pass with confident arrogance, expecting an easy victory. Yet awaiting them was the Spartan-led Greek force, around 7,000 men, including 300 Spartans, positioned with careful discipline. The narrowness of Thermopylae would soon reveal its strategic magic. Persian numbers could not be fully unleashed. The first clash was brutal but contained. The Greek hoplites, standing shoulder to shoulder in tight phalanxes, met Persian infantry head-on. With their long spears and heavy armor, the Greeks absorbed and repelled wave after wave of less armored Persian soldiers. The Persians, frustrated, attempted to outflank but were met by Greek cavalry and reserves guarding the flanks. Despite the disparity, the Greek cohesion and terrain advantage inflicted surprising losses on the Persians. The Immortals, Persia's elite guards, led several fierce assaults but found themselves repeatedly repelled amidst the narrow pass, their numbers becoming a liability rather than an asset. This first day set a pattern, Persian might blunted by Greek discipline. Day 2, stalemate and growing tensions. The battle on the second day saw both sides regroup and adjust. The Persians brought new strategies, including massed archery to weaken the Greek shield wall. Arrows darkened the sky, forcing the hoplites to endure a grueling barrage while tightly packed. Yet the Greeks held firm, their overlapping shields and heavy armor providing vital protection. Leonidas and his commanders understood they faced more than just physical battles. Morale, endurance, and supply lines became critical. The Spartan king rode among his men, inspiring steadfastness despite exhaustion. The Greeks anticipated relief forces from southern city-states, but knew their position remained precarious. Meanwhile, Persian commanders grew restless. Xerxes, observing from afar, demanded swift victory. His arrogance began clashing with battlefield realities, as time sapped the invincible image his empire projected. For the Greeks, every moment of resistance was a triumph of spirit against overwhelming odds. The night before day 3, betrayal looms. Unbeknownst to the Greek defenders, a critical moment was approaching. A local Greek named Ephialtes betrayed the pass's secret, a hidden mountain trail that could bypass the narrow Thermopylae choke point. This intelligence reached the Persians, who dispatched a select force to use this path and encircle the Greek defenders. When Leonidas learned of the betrayal, his options narrowed dramatically. With his main force potentially cut off, he made the fateful decision to remain with a small contingent of Spartans and allies to cover the retreat of the bulk of the Greek army. This choice embodied the brutal calculus of sacrifice and duty. Day 3, last stand and heroic sacrifice. The final day began under a shadow. The Persians, now attacking from front and rear, overwhelmed the Greeks through superior numbers and strategic advantage. The narrow pass, once a shield, became a tomb for the last defenders. Leonidas and his 300 Spartans, along with several hundred Thespians and Thebans who chose to stay, fought with unparalleled valor. Their phalanx held firm against relentless waves of infantry and cavalry, their spears striking like thunder. Eyewitness accounts speak of fierce, close-quarters combat, brothers in arms fighting to their last breath. Despite heroic efforts, the Greeks were eventually encircled. Leonidas himself fell in battle, his death a devastating blow, but also a galvanizing symbol for the Greek cause. The Persian forces, despite victory, had paid a heavy price for the pass. Aftermath and legacy of the 3 days. Though Thermopylae ended in a tactical defeat, the battle's narrative was far from over. The prolonged resistance bought critical time for Greek city-states to organize defenses, particularly their powerful navy at Salamis, setting the stage for future victories. The sacrifice of Leonidas and his men became a legendary testament to courage against impossibility. This 3-day saga masterfully blends strategy, human endurance, and shifting fortunes. Moments of tense stalemate gave way to explosive clashes, despair mingled with fleeting hope. The betrayal by Ephialtes introduced tragic complexity, a reminder that war often hinges on human choices beyond pure might. Thermopylae's progression underscores timeless lessons about warfare, terrain's leverage, leadership's weight under pressure, and the psychological warfare waged alongside physical battle. It's a vivid testament that sometimes, the greatest victories come not with conquest, but through acts of supreme defiance. In war, battles are often won and lost far beyond the physical clash of armies, deep within the minds of those who fight. At Thermopylae, psychological warfare and morale played a decisive role, shaping the fate of empires and engraving a profound lesson on human resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. For the Greeks, particularly the Spartans, Stoicism was more than philosophy, it was a way of life. From childhood, Spartan warriors were conditioned to endure pain, suppress fear, and prioritize duty above all else. Facing a Persian force that dwarfed them in size, this mental toughness became their greatest weapon. The harsh training, communal values, and shared sense of purpose cultivated an unshakable resolve to hold the line no matter the cost. Even when aware of the impossibility of victory, they embraced sacrifice as noble and necessary to protect their homeland. This stoic courage inspired their allies and sent ripples of defiance that echoed far beyond the battlefield. On the Persian side, confidence was pervasive but rigid. Xerxes and his commanders believed their vast numbers and imperial might guaranteed success. This sense of invincibility bolstered their morale early on. Why should 1,000,000 men tremble before a few thousand? Yet this overconfidence soon bred frustration as Greek resistance persisted, and the narrow pass frustrated traditional Persian tactics of encirclement and cavalry charges. The psychological strain of unexpected setbacks tested Persian discipline and patience, forcing shifts in strategy and command. Morale also hinged on leadership. Leonidas' personal bravery and visible presence among his troops reinforced hope and determination. He embodied selflessness, setting an example that transcended fear. By contrast, Persian leadership, centralized within Xerxes' lofty command, faced the challenge of communicating effectively to a diverse, sprawling army and maintaining unity among various ethnic units. The psychological pressure on Persian commanders grew as the battle dragged on, while Greek unity solidified. Fear was ever present but manifested differently on both sides. For Greeks, fear was acknowledged but mastered, transformed into adrenaline and focus rather than panic. For Persians, the massive scale of their force sometimes masked individual uncertainty and fatigue. The sheer number paradoxically could generate complacency or overwhelm coordination, weakening collective morale at critical moments. The mental duel at Thermopylae also played out through propaganda and symbolism. The Greeks cast the battle as a heroic stand for liberty, where courage was immortalized in stories and song. Persian failure to swiftly break the pass challenged their emperor's aura of divine favor and invulnerability, sowing doubt. Ultimately, Thermopylae transcends military tactics to become a story about the power of will. It reminds us that courage under pressure, steadfastness in the face of fear, and the willingness to sacrifice for a cause larger than oneself can alter history's course. These universal themes resonate across time, inspiring generations to confront adversity with unyielding resolve. When the dust settled on the rocky slopes of Thermopylae, the immediate reality was clear: the Greeks had been defeated. The Persian army, after days of fierce resistance, broke through the pass and continued their invasion of Greece. Yet this tactical loss masked a far more profound and enduring victory for the Greek spirit. In Persia, the victory was celebrated as a triumph of imperial might, yet it came with a bitter recognition. The prolonged resistance by a tiny Greek force had exposed vulnerabilities in what was presumed to be an invincible war machine. Xerxes' failure to swiftly conquer the pass challenged his image as a godlike ruler, forcing the empire to reconsider the